Mayor is getting national attention for the way that she's spending taxpayer dollars. She's now accused of spending tens of thousands of taxpayer funds on self-promoting billboards, as well as putting her name on government buildings. Government meeting in our public buildings to have meetings. Why are meetings being canceled? Why can't we have transparency?
The situation surrounding Tiffany Henyard in Dalton has spiraled out of control as the town's trustees escalate their pursuit of her following serious and shocking allegations of financial misconduct. Henyard is accused of embezzling funds that had been entrusted to her by the hardworking residents of Dalton. These funds, which were intended for community improvements, are reported to have been misused to fund her personal and lavish lifestyle. Recent developments suggest that the FBI has frozen her bank accounts and is preparing to seize her assets, signaling the gravity of the accusations against her. The situation has quickly gone from a local scandal to a full-blown federal investigation. The allegations against Henyard paint a disturbing picture of financial mismanagement. According to reports, she allegedly used taxpayer money to fund an extravagant and unnecessary security team, one that seemed more focused on her personal protection than on the safety of the community. This spending, especially considering that the funds were meant for infrastructure improvements and vital community services, has caused outrage among Dalton's residents. However, this extravagant expenditure was only the tip of the iceberg in her alleged misuse of public funds. Sources close to the investigation suggest that Henyard also used taxpayer dollars to fund large, eye-catching billboards placed throughout Dalton. These advertisements, which served little purpose other than promoting her own image, were funded by tax dollars that could have been used for more pressing and meaningful projects to benefit the town. For the residents, this act was another stark reminder of her disregard for Dalton's needs and her abuse of the position she held. Further reports indicate that Henyard's personal spending habits drained thousands of dollars from the town's coffers daily. The purchases she made, luxury items unrelated to the town's development, left many residents bewildered and angry. How could someone entrusted with the town's finances spend public funds on extravagant personal goods while Dalton's infrastructure remained in dire need of improvement? The question weighed heavily on the minds of the community, who now felt a deep sense of betrayal from someone they had once trusted with their financial contributions. As the scale of Henyard's alleged wrongdoing becomes clearer, the shock and disbelief within Dalton grow more intense. The community, once proud of their leadership and governance, now struggled to come to terms with the idea that someone they believed was working in their best interest had instead been lining her pockets at their expense. The evidence against Henyard is mounting, and it is becoming increasingly difficult for her to evade the scrutiny of both local officials and federal investigators. The trustees of Dalton are resolute in their determination to hold Henyard accountable for her actions. The community is united in its demand for justice, and the anger and frustration within Dalton are palpable. Residents who had once trusted Henyard to act in their best interests now feel a deep sense of betrayal, as they grapple with the realization that their town's financial resources had been squandered for personal gain. This scandal has also raised difficult questions about how Henyard's misconduct went undetected for so long. How was she able to manipulate the system and misuse funds without anyone noticing the growing red flags? Many in Dalton are left wondering if there was a breakdown in oversight or a failure in the checks and balances that should have prevented such an egregious betrayal. These questions have added another layer of frustration for the residents, who are now questioning the integrity of the systems they rely on. For Dalton, the road to recovery will be long and challenging. The damage caused by Henyard's alleged actions has left deep scars within the community. Rebuilding trust will take time, and restoring the integrity of the town's leadership will be no easy feat. The residents of Dalton now find themselves in the difficult position of having to not only deal with the financial fallout of Henyard's actions, but also restore their faith in their local government. The trust that once existed between the town and its leadership has been shattered, and it remains to be seen whether that trust can ever be fully rebuilt. As the investigation progresses and more details emerge, the residents of Dalton are left wondering what the ultimate consequences will be for Henyard. Will she be held accountable for her alleged actions, or will her powerful connections shield her from the full weight of justice? For now, it appears that her fate is sealed, with both local and federal authorities closing in on her. But for the people of Dalton, the real challenge will be the long, painful process of healing from this profound betrayal. They must now navigate the aftermath of Henyard's financial misconduct and begin the difficult work of rebuilding their community and restoring the integrity of their leadership. The road ahead is uncertain, but the residents of Dalton are determined to hold those responsible accountable and restore honor and trust to their town.
And your calendar, which includes the super mayor's birthday. Can't forget that. She could be involved as well, given that her salary for 2 jobs is nearly $300,000, more than the state's governor had. But it's all on the taxpayers. And this goes beyond signage and merch. Henyard put an ordinance in place that if she lost a future mayoral election, the next mayor's salary would be dropped from $200,000 to $25,000. But if she wins...
In Dalton, many residents have begun to suspect that Tiffany Henyard's ability to evade justice for so long, and the fact that she has yet to be arrested, is not solely due to her own actions, but also potentially due to the complicity of certain members of the town's Board of Trustees. Rumors have been circulating that some trustees, once seen as independent figures working to uncover the truth, might themselves be deeply entangled in the corruption. This has given rise to an unsettling and growing suspicion that the problem extends far beyond Henyard herself, raising the possibility that others in power may have not only been aware of her actions, but may have benefited from them. The implication is that the Board of Trustees, or at least certain members of it, may have been involved in the mismanagement and misappropriation of public funds, and now their efforts to pursue Henyard might be a strategy to protect a broader network of corruption that could be exposed if Henyard reveals what she knows. As the situation has escalated, Henyard has spent weeks defending herself in town meetings, attempting to maintain her position and deny all allegations. However, despite her persistent protests of innocence, the mounting evidence against her has become increasingly difficult to dismiss. The weight of the accusations seems to be catching up with her, and more residents of Dalton are finding it harder to take her side. Meanwhile, the trustees, who had long been involved in investigating her financial dealings, have faced their own difficulties in bringing her to justice. Initially, they attempted to conduct a covert inquiry into Henyard's finances, requesting access to her financial records in an attempt to uncover the full extent of her alleged mismanagement. However, Henyard reportedly made this investigation as difficult as possible, throwing up numerous obstacles and using her power and influence to silence anyone who got too close to the truth. In some instances, allegations have surfaced that Henyard even tampered with evidence, potentially destroying or altering documents to protect herself and derail the investigation. This manipulation and obstruction of the inquiry have only fueled suspicions that Henyard may have powerful allies within the town's leadership, people who are eager to protect her in order to preserve their own interests. This growing sense of intrigue has led many to wonder just how deep the corruption runs in Dalton and who else might be involved. As the pressure mounts on Henyard, the trustees have started to distance themselves from her, perhaps in an attempt to shield themselves from the ever-expanding scandal. However, this shift in allegiance only deepens the sense that the corruption may be far more widespread than originally suspected. What began as a seemingly isolated issue of alleged financial mismanagement has now spiraled into a full-blown scandal, one that involves potential cover-ups, abuse of power, and a network of deceit that spreads across the town's leadership. With each passing day, the situation grows more chaotic. The public, increasingly aware of the depths of the scandal, is demanding answers, while Henyard desperately clings to her innocence and her position.
And Dalton has less than 30 police officers. But that room, I only saw 3, I only saw 2 police officers. But presumably, whoever was on the camera is a police officer as well.
The trust of the people of Dalton has been severely damaged, and many are now questioning the integrity of the very officials who were meant to safeguard the town's well-being. What started as a case of financial misconduct has now opened up a Pandora's box, revealing deeper issues of corruption within the town's governing structures. The increasing uncertainty and turmoil in Dalton suggests that the road ahead is anything but clear. There are now questions about whether any of the town's leadership will be held accountable for their actions, or whether they will be able to protect each other from the fallout. Despite Henyard's claims of innocence, the growing body of evidence and the shifting political dynamics in Dalton make it clear that the situation is far from resolved. One thing, however, has become certain. Dalton is on the verge of a reckoning. The truth about what has been happening behind closed doors, about who was involved, how deep the corruption runs, and how far it has reached, will soon come to light, whether Henyard or the trustees want it to or not. The public is restless, and the pressure is mounting for officials to come clean. For the residents of Dalton, the painful realization that they have been betrayed by those they trusted is sinking in. The road to recovery will be long and fraught with challenges. The damage to Dalton's trust in its leadership will take years to repair, and restoring order will require a complete overhaul of the town's governing structures. The scandals currently unfolding have cast a shadow over the future of Dalton, leaving residents anxious and uncertain about what comes next. They now stand at a crossroads, awaiting answers from the very people who have betrayed them. As the investigation continues and the political climate grows ever more tense, it seems Dalton's fate hinges on the coming revelations. Will the true scope of corruption be exposed? Will those responsible for the town's fall from grace be held accountable? Or will they continue to evade justice? The community, once confident in its leadership, now faces a difficult journey toward restoring the integrity of its governance. One thing is clear: the truth will eventually come to light, and the residents of Dalton are determined to ensure that those who have wronged them will be held accountable for their actions. The people of Dalton had finally reached their breaking point after months of frustration with Tiffany Henyard's persistent efforts to obstruct the investigation into her corrupt practices. The growing disillusionment and anger within the community led them to call upon Lori Lightfoot, the former mayor of Chicago, known for her strong leadership and investigative expertise, to take control of the situation. Lightfoot wasted no time in diving deep into the case, and it didn't take long before a vast trove of damning evidence surfaced, implicating Henyard in a wide range of illegal activities. The findings were so alarming that it became evident that Henyard was facing serious jail time. Yet despite the mounting evidence, she remained free, shielded by a network of powerful allies who continued to protect her from justice. When Lightfoot assumed her role as special investigator, it was as though the full scale of Henyard's criminal behavior was suddenly brought into the light. What had initially been suspected as a case of financial mismanagement quickly morphed into something far darker and more sinister. Henyard's actions were not only illegal, but they were also wreaking havoc on the lives of Dalton's residents. One of the most significant discoveries Lightfoot made was the rapid decline in the town's general fund. When the investigation began, Dalton's general fund had a balance of $5.6 million, a sum that should have been more than sufficient to meet the needs of the community. However, by May 2024, that amount had plummeted to just $3.65 million, representing a staggering loss of nearly $2 million. This drastic financial decline served as the foundation for the deeper inquiry into Henyard's activities, but it was far from the only shocking revelation. Lightfoot soon uncovered a series of detailed credit card transactions that pointed directly to Henyard's irresponsible and selfish spending habits. These transactions were linked to a credit card tied to Dalton's public funds, and it appeared that Henyard frequently indulged in extravagant online shopping sprees whenever she was bored. Instead of using the town's money for its intended purposes, Henyard was using it to fund her own lavish lifestyle. Among the numerous purchases, one stood out as particularly egregious. On January 5, 2023, Henyard spent an astounding $33,000 on Amazon buying an assortment of goods that seemed completely unrelated to the needs of Dalton. But the extravagance didn't stop there. Two additional purchases were made on the same day, one for $4,753.14 and another from Wayfair for nearly $7,000. On top of that, Henyard racked up $2,200 at Best Buy and an astounding $12,988 on international vacations. The scale of the spending was beyond belief, making it clear that Henyard had no regard for the financial welfare of Dalton. She was using its funds in a way that bordered on outright theft. Her behavior wasn't just irresponsible, it was reckless. These were the very funds that should have been used to improve the town and support its struggling residents. While the people of Dalton faced financial hardship, Henyard was living a life of luxury, paying no heed to the suffering around her. Lightfoot's investigation uncovered not only the massive scale of Henyard's spending spree, but also the profound and detrimental effects her actions had on Dalton's finances. The people who should have benefited from these funds were barely able to survive, while Henyard seemed to operate as though the money was endless. The idea that someone could spend public funds so carelessly and recklessly, without any concern for the well-being of those who depended on it, was deeply disturbing. As Lightfoot's investigation delved further, it also raised serious questions about how Henyard had managed to maintain her position of power for so long, especially with so many warning signs and red flags surrounding her activities. How had she been able to manipulate the system and avoid accountability for her actions? The answer began to emerge as Lightfoot revealed the extent of Henyard's alliances within Dalton's leadership. The fact that she had strong allies, possibly even among the trustees, helped explain why she had been able to operate with relative impunity for so long. These allies were likely complicit in the corruption, ensuring that Henyard was shielded from the consequences of her behavior. Despite the mounting evidence and growing outrage from the residents of Dalton, Henyard remained free, and many were left to wonder how long she would continue to evade justice. While Lightfoot's efforts had certainly uncovered a mountain of evidence, the fact that Henyard was still protected by powerful forces only added to the frustration and distrust felt by the people of Dalton. What was clear, however, was that the full scope of Henyard's criminal behavior had now been exposed. It was only a matter of time before the truth caught up with her. As the investigation continued, shocking new revelations came to light, further compounding the damage caused by Henyard's actions. Tiffany Henyard's lavish lifestyle and reckless spending habits continued to shock the people of Dalton, who were facing severe financial hardship due to her egregious misuse of public funds. While the residents of Dalton struggled to make ends meet, Henyard indulged in extravagant shopping sprees, vacations, and personal luxuries, all funded by the very money that was supposed to support the community. But the financial damage wasn't even the worst of it. The community was stunned to learn that, as of June 18, 2024, at least 58 checks totaling more than $6 million had been authorized and printed, but never delivered to the vendors they were intended for. These vendors, who had been waiting for payment for goods and services rendered to the town, were left in the dark as Tiffany arrogantly retained the money for herself, diverting it to finance her personal indulgences. This was a massive breach of trust and an absolute betrayal of the very people she was supposed to serve. The shockwaves from this revelation rippled through the community, leaving residents feeling betrayed and helpless. But the investigation didn't stop there. Another deeply troubling revelation surfaced. 2 police officers believed to be employed by Tiffany had been receiving overtime compensation that far exceeded their regular salaries. One officer, who had earned $87,200 in base pay for the fiscal year 2024, somehow managed to rack up an additional $114,800 in overtime compensation, a staggering amount that seemed utterly disproportionate to their role. Another officer, whose salary was listed at $73,500, had somehow received an astounding $12,238 in overtime pay during the same period. This raised even more questions about the scope of Tiffany's manipulation of the system and her apparent disregard for the integrity of public service. These excessive payouts suggested that Tiffany was not only misappropriating public funds, but was also using her power to distort the town's resources for personal gain. She had allowed certain individuals to benefit unjustly while the rest of Dalton suffered. The entire situation was riddled with deceit, greed, and corruption. Tiffany's actions were not merely the result of financial mismanagement. They went beyond reckless behavior. They were a direct attack on the core of the community she was supposed to protect. The people of Dalton had entrusted her with their tax dollars, believing she would use the funds to improve the town and serve its residents. Yet she had turned that trust into an opportunity for self-enrichment. The revelation of her spending habits and the depth of her financial misconduct left the town in disbelief. The sheer scale of her wrongdoing was almost unimaginable, and the community was left grappling with the devastating impact of her actions. Despite the overwhelming evidence against her, Tiffany remained free, shielded by powerful allies who continued to protect her from facing the consequences of her actions. The frustration among Dalton's residents was palpable as they wondered how long she would continue to evade justice. They knew full well that every day she remained free only deepened the injustice they had suffered. While Tiffany's supporters continued to shield her, the residents of Dalton remained resolute in their demand for justice. The truth was undeniable. Tiffany Henyard's actions had caused irreparable harm to the town, and there could be no excuse for the damage she had done to its people. The financial ruin, the betrayal of trust, and the abuse of power were beyond comprehension. The community was united in their call for accountability, and the question now was how much longer Tiffany would be able to avoid the consequences of her actions. It was clear that, despite the protection she enjoyed from those in positions of authority, the residents of Dalton had reached their breaking point. They had had enough of her mismanagement, her greed, and her manipulation of the town's resources. They would not rest until justice was served, and the full extent of Tiffany's corruption was revealed to the world. The road ahead would undoubtedly be challenging, but one thing was certain. The people of Dalton were determined to see that justice was done. They would hold the person responsible for the financial devastation and moral decay in their town accountable for her crimes.